Herman Melville, Edgar Allan Poe, and Walt Whitman. I mean, these are titans, right? They pretty much laid the foundation for all of American literature. They were brilliant, they were ambitious, and, in their own time, they were seen as failures. So today, we're going to unpack this surprising story of how three of America's greatest authors were just completely misunderstood.
Okay, let's just dive right into this because it's such a fascinating paradox. How could the minds that give us Moby Dick, the modern detective story, and the free verse poem, how could they be so overlooked? That's the real mystery we're going to try and solve here. What was it that their own time just couldn't see?
So first, you gotta get a picture of the world they were living in. The lives of these three guys overlapped a ton during one of the most chaotic periods in American history. They were writing with romanticism in the air, the Civil War was looming, and the nation was just changing at lightning speed. And that whole context, it's absolutely key to understanding their work and why it didn't always, stick the landing.
All right, let's start with Herman Melville. Now, before he was a writer, this guy was a man of action, a real adventurer, whose incredible real-life experiences became the raw material for his dark, philosophical novels.
I mean, Melville's early life reads like something straight out of an adventure novel itself. He had to drop out of school and eventually went to sea, really out of desperation. And these experiences, I'm talking jumping ship, living with a tribe that was feared for cannibalism, even getting thrown in jail for mutiny. This stuff directly fueled his early books, which were actually big hits.
And then he wrote this line, probably one of the most iconic openings in all of literature. This is where Melville took a hard pivot, right? From just writing about his adventures to exploring the deepest, darkest corners of the human soul. And well, this is exactly where his audience started to get lost.
And this right here, this illustrates the problem perfectly. The public loved his first book, Typee. It was a thrilling story about his travels. They wanted more of that. But what they got with Moby Dick was this dense, symbolic epic about hunting a white whale that was really about good versus evil and obsession. It was a complete and total commercial failure. His masterpiece was pretty much ignored until the 1920s.
Okay, next up, let's turn to a man who couldn't be more different in style, but was just as revolutionary. Edgar Allan Poe. He wasn't just a master of the macabre. This guy literally invented entire literary genres.
Poe's life, man, it was just marked by unrelenting tragedy. All this personal pain and his constant struggles led to this reputation as a poète maudit, which means a cursed poet. And this dark personal history became the ink he used to write his terrifying tales, exploring all the grim and haunted corners of the human mind.
But here's the thing. Poe wasn't just about horror. He invented this whole new kind of story that he called tales of ratiocination. It was a huge pivot for him, from writing about a diseased mind to writing about a brilliant analytical one.
And in doing so, he literally invented the detective story formula that we still use today. I'm serious. The baffled police, the eccentric genius detective, solving the crime through pure logic, it all starts right here with Poe's character Auguste Dupin. Every detective from Sherlock Holmes all the way to today owes this guy a debt.
Of course, you can't talk about Poe without remembering lines like this from his poem The Raven. His focus on psychological horror and the macabre, it fascinated readers for sure, but it also cemented his reputation as this strange, neurotic genius who was just totally out of step with the mainstream.
All right, for a complete change of pace, let's talk about Walt Whitman. Where Poe was pessimistic and kind of gloomy, Whitman was all light and optimism. But in his own way, he was just as radical and, you guessed it, just as misunderstood.
Whitman's life experience was really woven into the fabric of America itself. I mean, from working as a journalist to his time as a Civil War nurse, he saw the country in all its incredible variety. This led him to create a single, lifelong project, his book of poems, Leaves of Grass, which was meant to be a song for a brand new democratic nation.
Whitman's poetry was a full-on revolution on the page. You have to remember, at a time when poetry meant strict rhymes and meters and really proper subjects, he took the rulebook and just threw it out. He wrote in free verse, that's poetry without a set rhyme or rhythm. He used the language of the common person, and he celebrated the body and the self in a way that was, frankly, shocking to most people in the 19th century.
A line like this, it just perfectly captures his bold, unconventional, and celebratory spirit. This was not the reserved, formal poetry his contemporaries were used to. It was raw, it was expansive, and for a lot of people, it was just way too much to handle.
So, we've got Melville, the philosophical adventurer,
Poe, the architect of nightmares, and Whitman, the radical poet of the people. Three completely distinct voices, yet they all shared the exact same fate. So now we can finally answer that question from the beginning. What is the common thread that connects their so-called failure?
Okay, so here's the crucial point. It wasn't a lack of talent, of course not. It was that their vision was aimed at a future their own time just wasn't ready for. They weren't writing for their contemporaries, they were writing for us.
And this chart just sums it all up perfectly. Melville gave his audience deep philosophy when they just wanted a simple adventure story. Poe dove headfirst into the criminal mind and the macabre. And Whitman completely shattered poetic form to write about subjects people thought were unfit for poetry. They weren't just writing books. They were building the future of literature piece by piece.
Which, leaves us with one final, pretty provocative question. It took decades, in some cases almost a century, for the world to catch up to these three. So it really makes you wonder, what revolutionary artists and thinkers are out there right now, creating works that we just don't have the language or the vision to appreciate yet?